Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from a historic South African estate. This is from Meerlust. This is their 2021 Chardonnay. And when I say historic, I mean Meerlust has been in the hands of the Myburgh family evidently for 8 generations, and the estate was founded in 1756, but not for all that time growing grapes. The name Meerlust means pleasure of the ocean, evidently. And we're about 5 kilometres inland from False Bay on the southern end of South Africa. So an area very much cooled by the cool winds carrying coolness up from from Antarctica, really, into the very sunny Stellenbosch region. The estate's at the south of Stellenbosch. It's to the south of the town of Stellenbosch itself, probably closer to Somerset West than actually to Stellenbosch. So as I say, the estate is historic, but it's only since the 1960s that the idea of making wine there has existed. Evidently Nico Myburgh went to Bordeaux, saw what they were doing there, came back, decided to plant his own vineyard there, and they were some of the first people to create a blended wine in South Africa. And the first vintage of their Meerlust Rubicon was produced in 1984, and that has a huge reputation within South Africa as a sort of a classic Bordeaux blend red wine. They also make a Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. 2021, it turns out, was the first vintage for their new winemaker Wim Truter, and taking over from Chris Williams, who I think had been winemaker there for sort of something like 15-20 years, and so there's been some long established tradition at Meerlust, particularly with their Chardonnays. I think they've gained a great reputation. The wine comes from 6 parcels within the vineyards, and there's a variety of soils. There's decomposed granite, which I think is a heavier soil and gives more sort of richness and full fruit, and then there's some shale and grey wacke, which gives more sort of lightness and freshness and the sort of lemony crispness to the wine. The vineyards are all sort of either north or west facing, I believe, and there's a nice stress in the way that the notes for this are written, in that they stress the fact that the picking team, for instance, is all picked by hand. The picking team are experienced pickers, so they're sorting, they know what to look for. There's only the best fruit coming here. This is coming off vineyards, the oldest of which was planted in 2007, so there's a little bit of age there. They're not massively old, but they're fairly mature vineyards. The fruit is pressed and it's left to settle overnight. And here it's a sign of quality with barrel fermented, or potential sign of quality with barrel fermented Chardonnay, that instead of the whole batch being fermented with one set of yeast, the juices then run off into separate barrels. They use 300-litre barrels, half of which are new and half of which are second fill, oak barrels. Doesn't say whether French or American. I would assume French, but that's not confirmed for me. And fermentation is allowed to start predominantly with indigenous yeast, although they do use some cultured yeast as well, so possibly on occasion that doesn't start. And that means that each barrel will have its own separate fermentation going on, and different yeast strains will take over at different times according to the conditions within the winery, according to the yeasts that actually infected it. They'll either have come in on the fruit or they'll already been in the winery, and that will give the final wine, because the final wine becomes a blend of all those barrels, it will give the winemaker blending options, and it'll give the final wine more complexity as a result. So that's always a good sign. The other thing I liked about the way that they expressed the notes was that they said that the wine was then racked off its heavy lees and left with fine lees to age. But they didn't say age for 12 months or age for 6 months or 9 months or whatever. They said they aged until the texture was right. So in other words, it's a question of how those lees are integrating with the wine, and actually time, they suggested, wouldn't be an issue. I should suspect it's probably about a year, but that was the approach that was taken. So anyway, let's have a look at the wine and see what we think of it. First thing to say, medium lemon yellow, very very typical Chardonnay sort of colour. Not a lot to report, to be honest. There are tears starting to fall. It's a 13.5%. It's marked as on the label. I believe it's about 13.25% in exact numbers. But the aromas. The aromas are a lifted, lemony, limey, touch of quince, a little bit of waxiness, a little bit of lifted blossom notes. But underlying that, there's a soft, not particularly ripe, a sort of slightly greenish peach note. It's not juicy peach, it's not overripe peach. And I suppose that is all rounded out with a sort of a creaminess. So there's a typical sort of barrel fermentation note there. I mean, I'm not actually seeing that much oak. There's a slight sort of saline, slightly cedary note, but it's not dominating. The fruit is what's coming out there. So let's have a taste. Trying that, there's lovely acidity. There's a lemony, almost sort of grapefruity, sort of that citric cut at the beginning, and then there's a richness following on. And as of yet, the two aren't quite settled together. You've got this sort of quite mouth-watering citric opening to the wine, and then a richer, more creamy, and now it's starting to open sort of butterscotch notes on the back palate, and the alcohol's adding a bit of warmth and roundness. There's almost a little bit of sort of gingery spice and cinnamon notes coming in from the oak. I suppose there's a little cedariness, and that's giving a complex finish that again is coming back to actually slightly more limey notes now, less lemon, that is enduring really quite nicely. In terms of style, this is, you know, medium to full-bodied. Actually, there's quite a lot of once it starts to open up in the mouth after that initial sort of crisp focus at the start. It's actually quite rounded. There's a tiny mealy sort of touch, almost sort of little bit of a character of a Merlot or something like that. You can see more of that on the finish, and I think that will probably open up, and you'll probably see more of that slightly earlier on, and you'll see it carry on to the finish of the wine. So yes, I like it. I like the wine indeed, because it's got this lovely freshness that's enduring really nicely. It's giving it long flavours. It's got intensity. It's not quite at a stage where it's ready to drink yet. I'd give it a year or two, and they suggest it will age for up to 6 years, and I think that's a reasonable assessment of the wine's ability there. So yes, that was Meerlust 2021 Chardonnay from Stellenbosch in South Africa. Hope you've enjoyed what I've said here. If so, do please feel free to follow our channel, do like and share the video, and I hope we'll see you again. Bye now.